Hey guys, what's going on? This is Mike West. You're listening to Into the Van, and I can't thank you enough for tuning in. This has really been a point of solace and a point of motivation and inspiration for me to keep doing this podcast through the pandemic, so I really appreciate you listening. If you have been enjoying Into the Van, please go leave a review wherever you are listening to this podcast. Let me know what you think of it. Drop me an email, drop me a message on social media or anything. Just let me know that you're listening because, we are 29 episodes deep into this podcast and I want to hear from you guys. If you are enjoying it, please tell me. If you aren't enjoying it, drop me an email and we can see what that is about. But I'm really fucking proud of this podcast and I hope it's getting you through, an hour every 2 weeks of something interesting to listen to. I've been super busy with Into the Van lately and we've got a ton of episodes racked up. I'm just going to let you know who we've got coming up in the next few months because that's how far ahead I am now. We've got Roseanne Reid on today's episode. Then we have Catherine the Great, hardcore country band Silo. Then we've got Small Town Monsters. That was Adrian and Seth Breedlove, who are, the director and producer of this documentary crew that just do these really amazing in-depth documentaries on Bigfoot, Mothman, UFOs, and that was a really interesting talk. After that, we've got James Reed, we've got Alison Self, and then we even have the Hippies and Cowboy podcast themselves stopping by to have a chat about podcasts and so much more. I'm really fucking proud of the people who have agreed to do this, and I can't thank them enough for sparing their time. This isn't paid for. I'm not offering anything other than an ear to chat, and people have been so generous with their time and knowledge and experience to come onto this podcast and talk, and I really hope you've enjoyed it. I've really been enjoying listening to a different bunch of podcasts like Hippies and Cowboys, obviously distraction pieces, stuff like that. I've been really enjoying just going into my music and listening to bands like Silo and James Reed and finding all these artists that are just incredible, and then when I'm lucky enough to get to chat to them, it's just a bonus. So this episode is of course brought to you by me and The Next Life, and I've got merch and I've got mugs and I've got a ton of stuff that if you like this podcast and you like my music, please head over to mike333west.com, pick up a shirt, pick up a mug, pick up a record, and just keep on supporting me because without you guys, I'm just talking into the void. I'm going to drop a little teaser of The Next Life here. And I really hope you enjoy that. Head over to mike333west.com if you want to pick up a record, a CD. We've got vinyl, we've got shirts, mugs, tote bags, Ouija boards, you name it. I'm going full kiss on this and just creating a merchandising empire. So if you were digging this podcast, you were digging my music, head over and pick something up. Without further ado, this is someone I've been really excited to talk to for a while. Roseanne Reid is, in my opinion, one of the best UK songwriters and one of the best songwriters around right now. And if you aren't listening to her, you're missing out. I've heard from her for a while, and then I've just kind of been like, who do I want to speak to on this podcast? And Roseanne's name popped into my head, and I was like, of course, shot her an email, and she got back to me so quick that in between sending the email and actually recording the podcast, it was like I sent it at night. In the morning, we did the podcast. It was that quick, and it shows how passionate and caring Roseanne is and how willing she is to, talk about her music and, make time for people. So this was a really fun chat. She's a phenomenal songwriter. She's been to songwriting camps with Steve Earle. We get into that. We get into EP Horticulture, which is out in April, so that'll be out now. Go check it out. Go listen to her album Trails, it's fucking phenomenal. So yeah, this is a really fun talk. I hope you really enjoy it. So without further ado, this is episode 29 of Into the Van with Mike West and Roseanne Reid. Welcome to Into the Van with me, Mike West. Cool. Thanks so much for joining us. But we talked about binge watching and stuff. Were you ever, did you ever binge watch? Because I know I was, super addicted to TV before I started doing, the music thing, as much and as full as I could. And it was at that point where I dropped every single thing and I, walked out of, every TV show, mid-season, mid-episode. I'd be like, I'm done. And I've not watched anything really since. And this has been the only time in, the last 5 years that I've actually binge watched stuff. Have you ever had that habit of binge watching things, or it's always just been...
Yeah, I mean, not particularly. I have to say I've got a very short attention span for one thing, so that doesn't sort of sit well for binge watching. And also, I think I'm pretty fussy in the shows I commit to. So stuff because there's a lot of stuff I struggle with when watching TV, particularly violent or gruesome shows. I can't handle them. If there's any sort of mildly sinister element to it, that makes me quite uncomfortable as well. So it's, I like nice stuff. I like comedies like The Big Bang Theory, stuff that's really cleverly done. But in terms of frequently binge watching shows, no, it's not something I've done up until the pandemic hit.
yeah, with the pandemic it was just a whole new thing of just everything's wide open. But it's been a crazy time, with kind of the announcements that have come out lately. Have you started focusing on your future plans for touring and stuff? Because it seems that kind of everyone's starting to send emails and scrabble around to see what they can do for the I think everything opens in June, is it?
Yeah, that's right. I think it's a tricky one because we've had a few false starts already, haven't we? And we're just kind of well, maybe tentatively approach the possibility of touring again. In terms of actual tours, I still think, for me anyway, it's going to be next year before I really get on the road again. But I think socially distanced shows might be quite popular and have a good chance of actually happening this year. So that's kind of what I'm focused on. And like you say, it's just been sort of an upsurge in activity in terms of, people approaching me going, well, what about this? What about this? But it is, for now anyway, it's on the smaller scale. And it's for, as I say, it's for one-off shows where the audience can be at a distance. So for now, I think I'll just get excited about that. Maybe not touring just yet, but
yeah. Until I think for me, because I'm obviously, this government I don't trust in any way, shape, or form. Yeah. So I think it'll be June 20th at 11:59 p.m. I'll be oh, maybe it is going ahead. But until that point, I'll start sending emails at 11:58 if I'm feeling optimistic that day. But it's a weird one because I'm meant to be doing a festival in July.
Yeah.
And yesterday it was it's on, and tickets started flying out, and all the early bird stuff and went, and I was oh shit, that's still going on, and I'm playing the fucking thing. I was oh, awesome, that's actually happening. And it's still, I just don't want to commit. It's I've been I've trusted and been heartbroken enough times to be
oh,
he's gonna do me wrong.
Understand. Yeah, I totally understand, and it's like that. It's as you say, it's the rug's been pulled under at the last minute so many times now, and it's just sort of I don't know. I think, like you say, until we're approaching the sort of eve of the deadline, I wouldn't get my hopes up too high. But it's a nice thought, I think. Festivals are an interesting one because in terms of being socially distanced, it's a lot easier in that sense for them. So, and with the better weather as well, I think people are more inclined to want to go. So, I think festivals might actually have a chance this summer. But Yeah, tours, I'm not so sure. Not so sure just yet.
Yeah, but what has kind of been your experience of touring in the UK? Because how long have you been performing like as Roseanne Reid for and doing this? Is it from 2014, 2015?
Yeah, it's been from around that time. I've been doing it for about yeah, the best part is sort of 7 years, sort of fully committing to it. Prior to sort of 2015, 2014, it was sort of just local shows. It was open
Mm.
mic nights, but it picked up from there. So it's, I mean, I think I've experienced a very sort of organic process
Mm.
in terms of touring, and that I started off very, very small, and I worked the sort of open mic circuit, folk club circuit, in sort of Edinburgh, Glasgow for um, a good couple of years, 2 or 3 years, before things started sort of going up a notch.
Mm.
And I actually can't remember what my first sort of UK tour was. I can't remember. I think it was about 2000 and maybe 16, maybe
Mm.
17. But as I say, up until that point, I'd mainly just done shows in Scotland. It was on a fairly local level. So it's a shame in that respect, because last year was due to be incredibly busy for me in terms of touring. I had two UK tours in the pipeline, a European one, and Glastonbury as well,
Oh shit,
and it
really?
was, yeah, and it just all obviously all got pulled. So
Mm.
I yeah, I think last year would have given me a much clearer picture in terms of being on the road
Mm.
regularly. Um, but yeah, as I say, up until that, it'd been the odd UK tour, but a lot of local stuff as well.
Mm. And were they tours that you booked yourself? Because I've only really toured the UK properly once, and that was all just done through like me just emailing venues and things. Like your first tours, was that the same kind of thing?
It was to an extent, but I can't lie. I'm not logistically smart at all, and that sort of thing I've always struggled with. So I think I was quite lucky in that people like Paul Fenn came on board quite early for
Mm.
me, and he helped me out in terms of making connections with people like Teddy Thompson and get me on the road with him. And Teddy ended up producing my first album. So that kind of, I did get in touch with a few venues, but again, it was mainly a sort of local thing. It was never
Mm.
I'll be on the road in the UK for 3 weeks, and hit this, that, and the next thing. I think I could do that now. I'm married to someone who really does that sort of thing very
Yeah.
well. But before that, no, there was no chance.
Oh, cool. And with Teddy Thompson, I think I saw, are you doing tours in 2022 with him in the like January, February?
Yeah, so that's the dates as it stands is sort of late January, early February. I'll be on the road with Teddy, and yeah, that's sort of the UK dates. It's been rearranged a couple of times now, so I'm hopeful for next year. It should go ahead by then, but yeah, January, February time. That's the plan at the minute.
Yeah, hopefully. I think that's a kind of a good thing because I remember like when everything got cancelled in March last year, people were starting to book stuff like August. I was like,
Yeah, yeah, I know there's
really?
no chance.
Yeah. But like obviously you had all this booked for last year because in 2019 you brought out the Trials album.
Yeah.
What was kind of your process behind the songwriting for that? Like what was kind of your oldest song that you'd had written for that record?
Well, I mean, it was a collection of songs that I'd sort of written and accumulated over the best part of 8 years. Actually, it'd been quite a long process because it was just the stuff I'd been writing since I started writing,
Mm.
that had then the opportunity had come up for it to actually be recorded and go on an album. So I think. Oh goodness, I'm thinking in terms of the oldest song from Trails. I think it was "Miles Away," which is I think the last one in the album, maybe not the second last one. That's terrible. I don't really know, but that was I think that was the oldest one. But the rest of them were written, I'd say, closer to maybe 4 or 5 years together. And yeah, it was, it was an interesting thing to record, as I say, because a lot of those songs felt quite old to me at that point
Mm,
because I'd had them for quite a while. So to go into the studio and just get an entirely new perspective put on a lot of them
mm,
was incredible, and that's where I think Teddy was just pivotal in
mm,
in that album. Because I couldn't. You get to the point where you can't really reimagine your songs as anything other than they are,
mm.
So I think that's where Teddy was crucial.
Cool. Like with kind of producers, like I've never worked with him. What did he kind of give you an insight into? Was it like the instrumentation or an arrangement kind of thing? What was it that kind of like pushed that new perspective?
It was, well, I mean, it was a variety of things. I think arrangement was one part of it, but just in terms of actually having a number of musicians as well was something a group he carefully sort of picked out for that album. But I think he was very aware that these songs had just spent their lives as purely acoustic songs.
Mm,
There'd never been anything else on them. So he sort of opened my eyes to the possibilities of a lovely musical bridge,
mm.
where I just, if I was doing a live show, it would just be, maybe I'd have a harmonica. That would be the extent of it. So I think in terms of just branching out musically, that's where Teddy really sort of helped me to push it along.
Oh, cool. Because I know you have that kind of like organ under a few of the tracks.
Yeah,
I just love that sound on
it's
like
brilliant,
acoustic
isn't it?
albums where it
Yeah,
gives you that richness and like
yeah,
a bounce to it. And I just like, I've been listening to your record and it's just phenomenal. Like the production of it and the instrumentation
yeah.
on it. But with kind of obviously these being acoustic songs, did you have an idea of what you wanted in terms of instruments on it or like arrangements or even like melody lines on the like edition?
Not really, not really. In all honesty, I had a very, very vague idea for a couple of the songs. But if you'd if you'd let me hear the songs, you know, as they turned out, before I went into the studio, I wouldn't have believed you, just because it was so far removed from anything I'd imagined for them.
Mm,
Um, So I think "I Love Her So" is a perfect example. That was written as a sort of introspective acoustic number, a little love song, and it just turned into a sort of almost like a Motown sound on the album. It had the horns on it, it
mm.
just, and that's the sort of difference I think having a producer like Teddy makes. Because I think if it were left up to me, the album would have been a lot more sort of bare boned,
Mm.
which is not a bad thing. It's how I love to play them. But I think it's fun to have them evolve into something else for an album.
Yeah, I think especially for albums and stuff, like I've done it, like all mine's got like extra instrumentation on it, where it's like you want the songs, like if you want to see the songs in its purest form, like
Yeah,
almost simplest form for a like less redundant word, it's like come see me live and I'll be performing it acoustically. If you want like this whole other experience that like I think an album deserves, where
yeah,
it's like you want to be able to put it on speakers and focus on it, this is for you. And it's like they kind of live in the same area, but it's a Venn diagram of
yeah.
what where they actually fall and what the listener gets out of it. It's a really interesting thing. And what I really enjoyed about yours was it does have that songwriter, like country folk vibe
Mm,
to it, but it's got this kind of not a modern arrangement, but it's got that organ under it. It's got like a production value that is really just polished and smooth. And it's
yeah.
a fucking brilliant debut album. Like it's an incredible
Thank you.
record. Like it is awesome. But you recorded it in Brooklyn and stuff. How did that come about to be, get to that place to record it over there?
Yeah, well, I mean, it was. I basically I had discussed it with Teddy for a few months prior to actually getting over there and
And
recording.
how did you meet it, Teddy?
Well, I supported him on a few of his Scottish dates on his UK tour in about, I think it was 2015, maybe 2014 actually. So we'd met on tour, and he'd heard the songs, and after the last show of the tour in Aberdeen, he'd come up to me and he'd said, if you're gonna do an album, that I'd like to be involved. So it just kind of went from there, and he had also produced Dory Freeman's record a little bit earlier, which is a superb album as well, and I think they've done a couple other things together. And he mentioned that what she did was raise the money to record through a Kickstarter, so just a crowdfunding campaign, and so that's the sort of route I went down to get the funds together. And we talked about locations for recording. I said, well, I'm not really that fussed. If there's a place you think it would sound best, it would work best, then I'm happy to kind of follow your lead there. And he said, well, I'm based over in Brooklyn. I know the best musicians out here, and it would make sense for you to come over for a week, and we just do it. So that's kind of how it went. And I was over there for, I think it was about 5 days. It was under a week. It was it was a quickly recorded album actually. But that's sort of that's how it came about. Is he pulled the musicians together. He got the studio sorted, and I just made my way over there for 5 days, and we got it done fairly quickly.
That's awesome. Did you send demos and like rough tracks ahead of time for musicians to listen to first?
Yeah. So I didn't have any recording gear at that time at home, so I just recorded all the songs I thought I wanted on the album on my phone, and just sent them across to him. And I know he circulated them amongst the guys to listen to in advance. And I think that it's extremely helpful for them, I can imagine, because they can work out arrangements and what they want to do for the song in advance of getting into the studio. So.
Awesome. And did any tracks get cut from the album that you didn't feel were necessarily right to put on, or did everything you sent across get onto trials?
It all got on. We were the one song I was considering cutting at one point was Hey River, just because I had hardly performed it live for one thing, so I perhaps wasn't that comfortable with it myself. But we found the actual arranging of that in the studio quite difficult, and that took us a few takes to get it right and to get the atmosphere right. So that was one that almost didn't make it, but we just we persevered with it. But I think all the songs I sent across made it onto the album.
Oh, awesome. And like with your songwriting, because you have such like a nuance to the way you do things, like this isn't me just complimenting you for the entire podcast, but I really enjoy your songwriting. Like it's got, for me, when I've been listening to it, it's got kind of like the soul and the reflectiveness of like Van Zandt, but it's got that like joy and like undertones that Brian always had in his writing.
Oh, I'll take that.
But with like your songwriting and stuff, what was the first song that really you felt captured either like the perspective that you had at the time, or really captured like your voice that you were like going forward? It's like, this is the songwriter I want to be. Right.
Yeah. I think it's definitely Amy for me. I think that was I wrote that about oh god, it must have been about 8 years ago now, 9 years ago. And I wrote it fairly quickly. I think I got the whole thing in about half an hour. And I just thought, you'll know yourself. When you get something good, it's a gut feeling straight away. You go, yeah, this is quite special. And I rarely get that with my songs, but I got it immediately with Amy. And I think, as you say, that was the one that sort of set the bar in terms of this is what I want to not recreate, but this is what I want to build on moving forward.
And was that the reason that's like track one on the record?
Yeah, just because it's I think lyrically it's probably the strongest song on there. But in terms of the arrangement as well, it's a very simple arrangement for that one. And I just thought that's quite it's actually quite a statement to start it off with that, because I think a lot of the other songs on there have more to them in terms of instrumentation and arrangement and production.
Hmm.
But for me, it's the best song, so it was a no brainer, you
Yeah.
know.
Cool. Like with Amy, I think I read, was that the song you performed at an open mic night in the songwriting camp?
Yeah,
'Cause I wanted
yeah,
to talk about like these songwriting camps, just like kind of explain like what they are in general and
yeah,
how you got involved and what made you want to like make the jump to go to one.
yeah. So it was. I got involved with Steve Earle's songwriting camp, Camp Copperhead in 2014, 2015, and I purely got involved with it because I admire Steve so much, and I'd listened to Copperhead Road since I was about 9. So I thought, well, that's, at that point I was certain that songwriting was something I wanted to dedicate a lot of my life to. And I thought, well, this is someone I can really learn from. If I'm
Mm.
going to be immersed in his classes for 3 or 4 days, that's a huge opportunity. So that's sort of how I got involved with Camp Copperhead. And in terms of going over there, it was like I'd never been to America at that point, so it was my family were like, well, that's your 18th birthday present, send
Nice.
you over there for a few days, and you can go to this camp. So yeah, it was kind of by chance I came across it. I googled what was going on with Steve, and that he'd announced the camp a few days earlier. So that's sort of where it got started with the songwriting camps.
Mm. Cool. Like, was that open mic a different, like, because obviously you've done the folk scene and the open mics
Yeah.
and stuff, was that, I can imagine that being more nerve-wracking an experience as like
Oh,
an
yeah.
18-year-old songwriter to get up and perform a song in front of Steve Earle, like
Yeah.
like not just like a camp or a gig, it's a songwriting gig.
Exactly, exactly. So you're surrounded by your peers basically, and you're you're surrounded by. I think we had over 100 people at camp that first year. It was
Mm,
very well attended, um, and as you say, you're surrounded by not only Steve Earle, but a lot of people who know what they're doing and they know what they're talking about,
mm,
and they know a great song. So it was, yeah, incredibly nerve wracking, and I almost didn't do it because I waited until the last night of the camp,
mm,
and I'd struggled up until that point because I kind of, I was away from home, and I was pretty homesick, and I hadn't exactly thrown myself into the camp in terms of meeting people,
mm,
so I felt I was quite isolated at that point. But I met a great Irish songwriter there called Gordon Barry, and he we were just kind of sitting on the porch one night, we were having a drink, and I said, "Well, okay, how about I play you this song? You can see what you think." And I played him Amy, and he said, "Listen, you just sign up and just do it.
mm.
Just do it at the open mic tomorrow." And that was a push I needed. But yeah, almost chickened out.
It's crazy. But it's weird how like those chance things or those split decisions can impact in such a way to be like, well, I wasn't actually like gonna do it, and
Yeah,
it's one
yeah,
of those weird just encounters. I think that from your career from there to now is like an incredible thing. Obviously, it's the first track on the record. To think you were like nervous about performing that, but it is, I think, the conditioning, the songwriting thing, because obviously you've been praised for your songwriting and stuff. Do you
mm,
always like, for me, whenever anyone mentions my songwriting, I always take that as like a higher compliment than anything else they can really say about the record,
for sure.
to hone down on, to be like called like a songwriter or even a good songwriter is just like, for me, it's just like the ultimate praise.
Yeah, for sure. I totally agree, and it's the same for me in that I sort of I prioritize it above everything else. There's all the other things that come along with this job. So there's touring, there's recording, there's lots of stuff involved to it. There's improving your voice, improving
Mm,
your stage presence, whatever. But I think I've just always had it in my head that as long as you have that foundation
mm,
of a great and a really good strong catalogue of songs, you'll be okay, and you can find opportunities from there. So that yeah, I totally agree. When someone really hones in on the songwriting aspect, that's the biggest compliment, bar none.
Yeah, and do you have an approach for your songwriting in terms of, you know, this needs to be hit, or you have like influences that you pull off like regularly? Like, what's kind of your approach going into, you know, Amy or even like Ten Serena Sky, like your new song that you've just
Yeah.
released? Do you have like a specific approach, or even just a specific like mindset that you go into for songwriting?
Um, Not particularly. I like to sit down. I like to have the physical things like a pad of pen and
Mm,
paper, and I like to be ready. But it doesn't always happen. Actually, I'd say most of the time it doesn't happen for me.
mm,
You know, it's just sort of in terms of the songs that have stuck, in terms of the songs that I've actually recorded and play live. It's a lot of them have, they've been an initial idea I've had in Tesco, and I've sung it into the phone, and
mm.
that I've just got that little extract to work from. Um, but there's not, I don't. I try and get my head in the zone. Like I try and listen to songwriters I really love in advance of sitting down and trying to do it myself.
Mm.
Um, but I also think there's a danger to that, in
Yeah.
that you can maybe take too much from someone else's songs. Um, so I deliberately haven't sort of solidified a process, if
Yeah.
you like. I have faith that inspiration will come. Not always when I want it, not always when I need it, but it will come eventually. And when it does, as I say, I think I've found having a little recording device on the phone the most useful thing, because you can
Yeah.
just you can get it down and then come back to it later.
Yeah, it's such an important thing. Like I have recorded, but I was going through, like I'm looking at album number 2 now to like play, and I was like, I really want to do this song, and then I was like, how the fuck do I play this song? And I went on
That's
to like,
it.
I'd put up a version on YouTube, so I like played it back and was like, oh, that's how it goes.
Yeah.
But who are you kind of spinning as you're trying to get into like songwriting? Like, who are your songwriting influences?
Well, I mean, I've I've definitely drawn most inspiration from guys like Townes Van Zandt.
Mm,
Steve Earle's been a big one. Bruce Springsteen, and those again, just those people that have this huge catalogue of great songs, and you
mm,
just kind of go. But that's a certain genre. But then you've got guys like Paul McCartney, and Brian Wilson from the Beatles, and
mm.
Dolly Parton as well. It's it's people that are prolific and unique, and that just can say what they're feeling perfectly.
Yeah,
It's not, there's no dragging it out. They just get the great lines into one song. So I'm definitely attracted to great songwriters first and
mm,
foremost. But I do kind of, I try and branch out as much as I can. I try and not get sort of stuck in a rut in terms of genres. Like I love Young Fathers as well. They're sort of like a hip hop band
mm.
that originate from Edinburgh, and they do mental arrangements. Just stuff you just like that should not work, but it's people like that just have something a bit different to
Yeah.
them, that I gravitate towards.
Yeah, no, that's such a good thing. And I think like what you were saying about being wary of taking too much, because I remember when I was in like a rock band when I was younger,
Hmm.
I'd go to band practice and be like, I've written this, and they could
Yeah,
name what Metallica album I'd been listening to that week for me to do it. And
brilliant.
I'd be like, fuck. And he was like, yeah, you've just been listening to Justice all week, haven't you? I'm like, God damn it. And like from then, whenever I was trying to get into like the songwriting mindset, I straight up refused to listen to anything that was in the genre I
Yeah,
was working in. But then I think that kind of gave me a better like songwriting standpoint, because like obviously I'm doing loads of acoustic stuff now. So if I'm trying to get in that mindset, I won't touch anything that's got like an acoustic guitar, and it's a load of like Public
yeah,
Enemy or a Carla or Loki, and it's those hip hop things, but the language they use, and I'm always kind of jealous of hip hop and rap because they can fit in a lot more, like not just words in terms of how like
mm,
fast they're rapping or anything, but they have just like a wider variety of language that they can use because they
totally agree.
aren't necessarily inhibited by like keeping it's like a chord pattern or a song
Yeah,
structure. And
yeah,
Towns and Prine kind of had that free form way that was almost Walt Whitman-esque in what
Yeah.
they did, but they were still bound to it. And I always enjoy that hip hop thing. But are there any kind of like modern songwriters you've been listening to, or anyone new that's kind of coming through that's
Yeah, I
grabbed your
mean,
attention?
yeah, there's definitely a few. As I say, I try and listen to as much new music as I can because I know my go-to is stuff from the 80s and the 90s sort of
Mm,
thing. So I try and branch out. I think well, he's not exactly new. Alexi Murdoch
mm,
is one that I really have listened a lot to over the past year or so. So he's a sort of folk singer-songwriter. A guy called Rory Butler as well is a more again, he's quite folky, but he's doing a few sort of interesting things right now. He's just got a new album out as well.
mm,
So um, I think in terms of new acts, I still gravitate towards acoustic, you
mm.
know. But I'm trying to think of sort of mainstream examples that I've really got into. Um, there should be some.
If you
Give
want to
me a
go,
minute, and I'll
if you want to,
definitely.
if you
It'll
want to go
probably.
deep cuts or like lesser known, like new folks, like hook them up because I'm always trying to find like
Yeah.
new people to listen to. But what's kind of been not only your perspective on like the UK scene for like country and folk and Americana, but what's kind of been your viewpoint of Americana in general? Obviously, there's contention over like its name and what it kind of encapsulates because it's still country and folk and stuff. But you've kind of been around since like 2014. You've seen the kind of Americana not just like boom, but like solidify as its own thing. What's kind of been your experience with that?
Well, I mean, I think it's been first things first. It's been brilliant to witness because I think there's such a huge appetite for Americana music over here, and it just needed a base and then a bit of a
Mm,
boost in terms of profile. And I think it's had that over the past few years, as you say. So it's been brilliant to see. But I think it's interesting for me at sort of local level. So if you go out to see like an open mic night or you're on the folk circuit now, I think you'll hear a lot more Americana music being played than you would have before. So
mm,
whether that's originals or covers, whether it's people, covering Jason Isbell or guys like that, it just seems to be happening and more accessible at a grassroots level.
mm,
Um, More people are listening to it, more people are aware of it. So you've got your big events like the AMA UK Awards every year, stuff like that. But I think for me, it's just been interesting to see how it's affected local local
mm.
nights and local attitudes towards Americana music.
Oh, cool. And like, I don't know. I always find not Americana as a weird thing, but it is like that big catch-all where it's like the same thing as, when someone's a singer-songwriter, and I'm like,
Mm.
well, RZA is a singer-songwriter because he writes songs and he sings. So it's like it's what kind of that balance is. But with the UK scene, have you found compared to the American scene, like a struggle and stuff? Because I'm trying to find, the positives for Brexit and stuff where we can't
Mhm.
go to Europe as easy and stuff with the UK scene. Have you found like strengths that are like in and of itself like an independent thing that's not necessarily relying on the States?
Oh, I see what you mean, sort of like yeah, like a self-contained
Yeah.
sort of thing. Yes and no, because I think there's such a strong community feel in the Americana uh, sort of genre over here, and therefore I think there are, there's an audience that will pay out their money regularly to come and see shows and buy new music.
Mm,
But at the same time, you're right. It's not a big place. The UK isn't a big place in terms of touring, and I think in terms of finding sustainability as an artist, if you can't, if you haven't got Europe as an option,
mm,
and it's going to cost you an arm and a leg to get a visa for the States, it's difficult just in terms of size over here.
yeah.
You've not got as many options for venues. And unfortunately, the really sort of negative side of me thinks, well, maybe the venues are going to be even less after the pandemic, So um, I think I think the appetite is strong. I think the community is strong. I think there's a lot of momentum for Americana in the UK right now. But you're right. I think it will. The test will be in the next few years when we see, how people deal with the constraints on tour.
Yeah, I think the sustainability thing is like the nail on the head. That's what I've been kind of thinking about, because it's like you can do a 3 week tour, but then it's like, how long can you leave it? Then all the people are just gonna get sick of you. Because I remember, like, I could set my watch to Motorhead's winter tour, but they'd only ever tour once a year, and it's like, if they could only ever tour the UK, though, how many times would they actually go on tour? And it's like one of those things where I think I'm hoping that people rise to the challenge and more grassroots venues can kind of take a stand, and pubs may even start trying to take more of a chance on original music and not just like cover acts and stuff. But with kind of, you've had, obviously you recorded in Brooklyn, you've got that kind of American kind of connection. Did you ever think about moving over there and setting up for your career there?
Honestly, no. Just in
Really?
terms, no. It's. I mean, the thought of it has occurred to me a few times, but the actual, you know, I guess anything beyond that has never really come to fruition. Just because I love living here. I love being in Scotland, and my family's here, my friends are here, and the things that just keep me happy are here. And I just think if I were to, take my roots and move to somewhere like America, which is different, it's a very different country, I think I'd struggle. And I think if I were doing that purely on the basis of career, I don't think there's enough motive for me to do that at the minute anyway. I just, as I say, I think I love living here too much, and I think there are definite advantages to being in the States for what I do, but at the same time, it's kind of like it's a virtual world now. You can there are opportunities you can access by being elsewhere. So yeah, that's kind of where I am with it at the minute anyway.
No, it makes sense, because I wanted to talk about your September tapes you recorded in Nashville, and it is, there is that kind of mindset where if you want to be a musician in the UK, you have to move to London. If you want to be a musician in the world, you have to move to America, where it's like either you go to Nashville or New York or LA.
Yeah.
But you've kind of, obviously you've stayed true to your roots and stuff, but what was your experiences like recording in Nashville? And have you really, have you toured America much, or is it just you've gone to Nashville and
Well,
things?
I mean, my gigging experience of America is very, very small as it stands. I've never done a full tour over there, and in terms of where I've actually played as well, it's just been, I've done a couple of shows in New York, I've done a show in Nashville, and I think that's it. It's been very, very limited. But in terms of being over there and recording over there, absolutely brilliant, because you're just, you're surrounded by like-minded people that totally get what you do, that are enthusiastic about what you do. They really know their stuff, particularly in Nashville. They really know their stuff as well. They know all the best musicians, and I found it a brilliant experience recording over there. And I don't know how it would differ if I were, my latest EP I've just recorded at home. I didn't go to a studio to do that, so I don't know how it would differ if I were to record over here. But America, and particularly Nashville, Brooklyn, creative places, great place to go and record and just do some stuff.
And with the recording that you're doing from home, what's kind of your setup for recording?
Yeah, it's a very, very simple setup. I basically have like a Focusrite, a Scarlett like 2i2 Focusrite that I record through, and I just do it through GarageBand. That's the sort of the interface I use. So it's I reached out to a couple of guys in the sort of the more techie side of music when I wanted to do the EP, and I said, look, I want something for an acoustic setup. It's not going to be anything extravagant. So It's very simple. It's, it's the one vocal mic, and the guitar goes through a DI. So and I just do it in the back bedroom. It's just the quietest room in the house. So it's been really lovely actually recording at home. But yeah, entirely different to be in the studio.
Yeah. Did you have like a different mindset going in? Because I'm looking at, like, I've got the album out that I did in a studio and stuff, and I'm looking at what I can do in terms of new music. Did you have any trepidation about, obviously, like, this is, recorded in Brooklyn, it's
Mm.
this, and then it's like, this is the home recording, and it's got that, is Ten Smoke Sky from that home recording session?
It is, yeah,
Brilliant. And
yeah.
did you like mix it yourself and stuff?
Yeah, well, I know. I mean, I basically for Tension Sky, I did all the harmonies and the guitar overdubs. So all the instrumentation stuff is done by me. But then I got Dave Iringa to mix and master the whole thing. And he's done a ton of stuff with like the Manic Street Preachers, and
Mm,
he's really good guy to work with.
mm,
So um, because I knew that's out of my comfort zone. I can't do that sort of thing. So it's I knew it was, if I was going to release it properly, it's best to get it sounding as good as it can be, and Dave sort of did that. But yeah, in terms of just what I did, it was just the musical side of it.
not awesome, because it sounds so great, and that's kind of the accessibility thing where he was saying you don't have to be in certain places, like with the power of the
Yeah,
internet and stuff, you can do that, and it's really cool to see that setup work so well. But
yeah.
like with that EP, did you have anything in mind when you were going into it to be like, I'm gonna record this certain amount of songs, or I just want to do this kind of collective? Was there anything for that record that you kind of went in wanting to
Yeah.
do?
Well, it was a fairly loose idea. I knew I wanted it to be three or four songs. It's turned out being four, and I knew I wanted it to be quite a folky record, and I also knew I wanted to capture that it was recorded at home in the middle of a
Mm,
pandemic. I was just like, well, this is such a unique time. And it was the first time I'd had any experience of recording on my own. So that they were sort of that's the sort of bedrock of where I was working from, was just um, capture the time, capture the mood of the world right now.
mm.
And yeah, don't try and hide the fact that it was recorded at home, because I think actually it adds to it. I
Mm.
really do.
I think that's an interesting thing, because it's, you like, especially as a songwriter, you want to show those like cracks,
Yeah,
and you want to show that kind of, not necessarily DIY, because that's kind of like another kind of ethos or side thing, but with a songwriter you want to show like the honesty of things, and I
yeah.
think that really captures it. But is that coming out in April, that EP?
Yeah, so I mean, the plan is April right now. We might push it back to May, just in terms of, because we want to do a run of vinyl for it.
Oh really?
Yeah, so I mean, the vinyl has been badly hit by the lockdown as well. So just in terms of getting that together, we're hoping for April, but it might be May. But we're just releasing the songs single by single, so I'm releasing one a month, and then the last song will come out in tandem with the full EP. So that's the plan at the minute. But it's not, it's a different experience to the build up to releasing the album. You're just sort of like, it's more pressure for one thing, because you're just, this is all me, and it's a much more intimate
Mm.
piece of a body of work than the album was. And you just kind of go, I hope other people can't hear it, but I can. There's little idiosyncrasies on a couple of the songs, where I go, God, I wish I'd done that differently. But again, it's part of the beauty of it. There's not one single one of those four songs I would class as a perfect recording. I think they're all, they've all got little things where it's you can hear the sort of personal, natural nature of it. But I love that. That's kind of, I'm glad I've kept that.
Yeah, no, that's the best thing. And with, obviously it was vocals and DI. Did you perform at the same time, like, and record it all, or did you do the guitar track and the vocals separately?
Yeah, I did it separately, which was again that was a new thing for me because I'm so used to just doing the two together. But at the same time, it sort of clarified how I wanted it to sound
Mm.
individually. You can really kind of focus on the vocal, you can focus on the guitar when they're done separately. So um, as much as it made me hate my guitar playing, it sort of you can you can find benefits to do it that way for sure.
Mm. And what guitar like is your main one? Like, what's your go-to for it?
Well, I use a Tanglewood most of the time, so it's a Tanglewood just with the DI. But I have like a little small sort of travel size guitar as well that I like to use. But in terms of recording for the EP, it was a Sigma, so it was a Sigma just with the DI in it. Um, and I just sort of I like the sound of that. It's quite a folky sounding guitar.
Mm.
You've got the deep sort of rich bass notes, and the lovely sort of lilt to the other strings. So yeah, that was my go-to guitar for recording.
Oh, cool. Like, what was your first guitar? Because I wanted to kind of touch on obviously your musical background with your dad and stuff, like coming from that perspective. Because I remember, like, I've been thinking about this. Like, I remember I had to fight tooth and nail to get my first guitar when I was a kid, because they were just like, "Hey, you won't bother with it," and I was like, "No, I really
Yeah.
want it." What was it
Oh
like
yeah.
to, yeah? What was it like to kind of be in a background? Was it encouraged to like have that musical like inclination or?
Yeah, it was. I mean, in terms of access to guitar, my dad doesn't play. He always said it hurt his fingers, so he actually gravitates to he writes on the piano.
Yeah.
Um, so it was actually my mum's guitar that she'd been given by her dad. That was the first guitar I played. So it was one that had been in the house for a number of years. Um, and then after that, I think 'cause it was a pretty big guitar, especially for a sort of 11-year-old. I moved on to one of the classical sort of nylon stringed ones I think you used
Mm.
to get in IKEA. I
Yeah.
don't know if they do them anymore, but I moved on to that, and that was my first sort of experience with guitars.
Mm. Yeah, I've like the first one I've still got. It's a like an Argos, like 20
Yeah,
quid classical nylon string guitar with like the necks where it's like that thick. I
brilliant.
remember,
Yeah,
and that's why like I think I can reach to like the seventh fret with one hand because I just had to
yeah.
learn how to use this huge fucking neck on like this little guitar.
Brilliant. I don't, but there's a lot of appeal to guitars like that because you're kind of like, well, this is what I learned on, and
Yeah.
this is what helped me fall in love with the instrument. So, it's um, as much as I probably wouldn't play it at a gig now, I still have a lot of fondness for them.
Yeah. That's the thing. Whenever I've took my guitars to the shop to get like cleaned and restrung and had to work over, I always fall back to just that little because it's
Yeah.
still the same strings I've had since I was like 12, and
Oh
it's
God.
got all the sticks and stuff. Like I've never changed anything about. I'm still waiting for one of the strings to snap, but it
Yeah,
just hasn't.
this is it. I actually think they're pretty well made, those guitars.
Yeah.
They're pretty robust.
Yeah. If the apocalypse hits, it's cockroaches and Argos guitars.
Yeah.
So is the Tanglewood what you tour with and stuff as well? Do you have like a backup guitar, or is that just the one you use?
Yeah, I take the Tanglewood with me on tour. I I mean I usually just I go on the road by myself and I don't
Mm,
really I'll have maybe my manager might join me for a couple of shows down south. But a lot of the time I just it's me getting a guitar and a suitcase on the train on my own. So I'm just kind of like I just stick to one guitar.
mm,
And the Tanglewood has served me really well. It's very robust. It comes out really well through a DI. So, yeah, that's the one I've used for a few years now.
Oh, awesome. And we're wrapping up. I don't want to keep you too long. So you've got the EP coming out in April. What else are you working on a full album on top of that or?
Yeah, and I mean, I've got all the songs ready for the next album, and I think it's just a case of trying to get the logistics organised now in terms of when can we record for one thing, and where's it going to be.
Mm,
So I've had discussions with Teddy again, and we're I mean, at this point, we're kind of moving towards recording it at home again and just getting, musicians wherever they are in the world to add their
Mm,
overdubs remotely. I think, if one thing, it's gonna keep costs down. It's not cheap getting in a studio for a
yeah.
week, so that's kind of where we are at the minute, and it gives us that flexibility. I'd love to record this next album over the summer and get it out towards the end of the year. So that's the plan at the minute.
Awesome. And you've got the tour in January, February. I think I saw, was there a Manchester date for that?
There should be, yeah. I can't remember which venue it
I
is.
think I saw Band on the Wall.
Band on the Wall, that would be
Yeah.
the one. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So there will be. There's definitely a Manchester date in that tour with Teddy, and I love that venue.
Yeah.
That's so good.
I've seen Lyra Lynn there. That's the only time I've been to that
Wow.
venue. But I'm gonna be there in February to see you and Teddy. But in terms of a solo tour and stuff, have you come down Manchester or Liverpool way much?
No, I haven't, and that's I can count on one hand the times I've played those cities, and
Mm.
it's depressing because the times I have played, the audience has been great, and obviously they're music cities. There's a big sort of student base there as well, and that I find that always adds to the gig. So
Mm.
yeah, something I'd like to do more, definitely.
Cool. And like, just before I let you go, with the second album, do you have an approach that's like different or a mindset that's different from Trials? Like, are you going in with anything like set and like how you want to kind of like what you want to convey across to people, or what the message of the record will kind of be in an overarching sense?
Yeah, I'd say I'm a little less green around the ears this time in terms of, I have a better idea of what I want.
Mm.
And I'm not as averse to making it more of an acoustic album this time. The first album I thought, no, it's if I'm recording, I'm gonna, everything
Yeah.
really kicks and sync at it sort of thing. But yeah, I'd say I would like to keep it fairly simple this time. I
Mm.
think I think that'll be the main thing, especially if we're doing it at home. So it'll probably be quite different to the debut, but I think it'll have a lot of familiar elements to it,
Mm.
if that makes sense.
Oh, awesome. Well, I can't wait to hear it. But yeah, thanks so much for joining me
You're
today. I don't
welcome.
want to take up too much of your day and stuff. Yeah, I
No
really
worries.
appreciate you making the time, and I'll be seeing you in Manchester before.
Yeah, lovely.
And that is episode 29 of Into the Van, Into the Bag. Thank you so much to Roseanne for sitting down and chatting to me. Please go check out our EP Horticulture. Go check out our album Trails. You will not be disappointed in the quality of the songwriting, of the songs themselves, of the talent. And make sure you catch Roseanne when you can, when she's on tour in your area. Until next time, folks, keep on supporting the things you love. Keep on listening to the podcast. Please review Into the Van. Please let friends know that you're enjoying this podcast, because without word of mouth and without your support, I'm just talking into the void. And without you, what's the point? Peace.